Hi, and welcome to Lab Games. I'm your host, Anthony.
And I'm Francis.
Today, we're going to talk about
Fabled.
The Spirit Lands.
The Spirit Lands.
Yes, so Fabled is a game by Crody Games. And it is about basically the end of times, right? So thematically, gods...
Or the beginning of times,
well,
I guess.
you're creating the world anew, right? So the gods are abandoning the human and spirit realms, and they're going to go off to do godly things. So they're handing the reins
They're
over.
ascending.
They're ascending, yes, they are. Indeed. They're like the elders, they're ascending. So they're leaving humans to create the world anew. They're leaving the reins and the power of humans, which we all know is a train wreck waiting to happen. But that's what they chose. So humans are going to have 7 sages they're allowed, and those sages are going to explore mysterious paths and visit mystical, magical locations in order to collect books of knowledge.
Yes.
And then convert those books of knowledge to better books of knowledge, ultimately to the books of sun, which will be how we decide who the winner is.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So take a look at the table, and you shall see Spirit Lands set up for 2. As far as the components go, why don't you take us through what the setup goes for Fabled and how the Spirit Lands are sort of populated?
Sure. So we can get in a little bit later to kind of how the scenarios work and everything, but you're going to start the game with your lands, which are completely open because we haven't explored anything yet, and then you have some options for lands. So sort of an offer for 3 different types of lands. We have prairie lands, we have mountains, and we have forests. And these we're going to draft these kind of into our collaborative land that we're exploring and pay for them with our books of wisdom. So thematically, I guess you could consider the more wisdom we have, the more we're able to explore a certain land. It kind of works that way. We're going to play the game over 10 rounds over here, and each scenario will be set up a little bit differently with regards to the tokens that are slotted in here, and these will either give you allies that you can play with or some other benefits as you go through the scenario. So mechanically, what we're doing again is we're drafting these cards into this sort of shared, you could think of it as like a tableau. We're doing it maybe in a not so intuitive way. So I know when we started playing this, you want to kind of place them left to right, and that's not what's happening. So you're going to set them down in the middle of the table at the prologue or the start of each game. Each player will choose one to seed here. And then subsequent cards that are explored on your turn can either go to the left or to the right or in between here. And you'll see that when you seed cards into this tableau, sometimes you'll get paths that connect like this, and sometimes you'll get paths that do not connect. So this is all part of the strategy because we are going to have sages that are going to be on these cards moving through these lands. And every now and then they will be stopping at these fabled places where they can convert books of knowledge into other books of knowledge or gain other benefits.
Right. So why don't we actually play a few turns just so people understand how it's going. Now, another thing to talk about real quick is this is the time track, right?
Yep.
And as Francis said, you're going to be moving this token down along the chapters. It's like a book, right? You're starting out in the prologue. And the prologue is going to play different than every other round or chapter, if you will. These tokens, which represent bonuses and special events in some scenarios, as well as this token, which is the end token. That tells you when the end game is. It may not always be 10. It could be shorter, for all you know. It depends on the setup of the scenario. We'll cover that in just a moment. But as far as setup goes, you set the game up if you're playing a scenario according to the scenario. It'll tell you what to do. It'll tell you what to do with the cards. It'll tell you what to do with your allies. Now, in this game, you do have allies. Each of you gets dealt 3, and you keep 1. And in this case, we each kept our allies, which will give us special abilities, which we can talk about as well. We have our 7 sages, as we spoke about earlier, and we were also given started currency, which is 2 prairies, 1 forest, and 1 mountain. Book of knowledge. And why do you need these to start? Because as we take turns, and you could be player 1, you show them what it is to pay for lands as you bring them out.
Right. So again, thematically, you kind of like need wisdom in order to explore lands. So I will start off, for example, by taking one of these 2 on offer here, these mountains. And now in order to take this card or explore it, I need to pay a mountain. So the cost of the cards that you're exploring is always going to be 1 for the type of land, plus 1 prairie book for each other type of that type in your...
For each other copy
of that type of land.
Particular type of land, yeah.
So I'm only going to pay the 1 mountain to bring out this mountain here. Again, it's going to go kind of in the middle of the table where we're going to build out from it. And then we're going to put sages out on each of the paths. So the mountains always have 2 paths, like this. So they get 2 sages. Everything else gets 1 sage.
And they always go on the number 1.
Yep.
Right? So that's her turn for the prologue.
Yeah.
And then I would get a turn for the prologue. And all you can do in the prologue is bring out a land tile.
Yeah, it just kind of gets you set up.
Get you started. So I could, for example, pay 1 prairie, right? Because there's no other prairie cards out there. But I will take a prairie and bring it out. Now the prairie, if you notice, the books of knowledge go in color order. And we have them in order here, from lowest value to highest value, right? So you've got prairies is the cheapest, mountains are the next, and then forest is the most expensive of the knowledge books. But then you've got the sun books, which you can only get by converting 2 greens into a sun, right?
Yes.
And that's the winner of the game is whoever has the most of the sun tokens.
Yeah.
So I paid my prairie. It's the cheapest one. So obviously the cheaper lands, spirit lands you get, the less beneficial those lands are when it comes to rewards.
Yeah, they have like fewer fabled places.
Right, there's shorter paths, weaker fabled places. So we'll put these in as we've shown you. Like I could put that on either side, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I'll put it here, even though neither of my paths connect. And it doesn't really matter yet because we're going to be, every turn you can potentially add more of these in. I will put my sage on the number 1 spot, and then we'll start to progress forward. So now we would move to chapter 1, and then player 1 would then take the lead. But on your turn, you actually have different options of moves now.
Yeah, so we can, on our turn, take 2 books of prairies, so you can kind of just sit there and, study the prairies, I guess. Like you're collecting knowledge of that starting land. You can perform 1 or 2 conversions. So again, that's converting 2 books of one type to 1 book of the next higher type. You can move one of your sages 1 step. So again, that's moving them from 1 step to the next. And then ultimately you can add a new location. So finally that'll be your last option. So that is the action phase of your turn. There's going to be a movement phase and some other things. But I'll go ahead and let's see. I'll pay a forest token or book and no prairies because it's not out yet. And I'm going to place this forest. And what my hope will be is that nothing else gets placed in between here because it'll be nice for my sage to be able to kind of hop from one to the next one and continue along down that path. So that will be my action. I'm going to put a sage out on the number 1 like that. And then I am going to move to my movement phase. So in this phase, you get to declare movement in any 1 location type. So in this case, I could say mountains are going to move. And I would move my sages 2 steps. And then if Anthony had sages on mountain cards, he would move 1 step with each of the sages that are on those cards. Next is the Oblivion phase, which is just if there's no sages on any of the cards, like if they've moved off of a card and now there's no sages on it, that card would go away.
Yep, that's how it sort of clears the table.
Yep.
So that would be the end of her turn. I would draft another tile, so I could, now here's one, if I say, okay, I want to do another forest. So it'll cost me a forest knowledge, but it'll cost me 1 additional prairie because there's already a forest out there.
Exactly.
So I would take any one of these, and I could actually slot it in over here if I so choose, right? Because I knew I didn't have a path to connect this to, and voila, I just created a path. And you can also strategically cut other players' paths off by putting these in. But now my path will continue on, and that's so I would do that. I would bring in my sage. That's what you always do. You bring in your sage, and then I would choose which type of movement, which land type. So I'm going to say, so if I said forest in this example, he would move 2 spaces.
And I would move 1.
And then she would get to move 1. Every forest land type would then get to move.
Yep.
And we're going to continue this basically until we reach the 10th chapter in this instance. But one thing you should notice that we didn't happen yet, because it doesn't happen for a little while, is every one of these locations where you have these little dots coming off it, and every card has them. Some of them have multiples. These are landmark spaces that go to fabled places. And these fabled places, like if I were to get to the 7 here, I could activate either one of these 2 fabled spaces.
Yeah, I think it's like the Universal Tower.
Yeah, so this card here will tell you exactly what it does. So in this case, the Universal Tower will let me transform one book into one book of the next tier, which is a 1-for-1 trade, which is huge. So I could take my blue, if I use that tower, he would go here and then come right back, and it would be like, okay, he's using the tower, I convert this blue into a green book, right? And you couldn't use the other one. You only can choose one of them if it's a split path.
Right.
If I was here, I would get to use this guy, which is this fairy in the books. The books, take books of prairies equal to the total number of locations with your sages. So I would get 2 prairie books. So that's how these basic fabled locations work. Right. So you're essentially moving around, adding more lands, moving your sages around. You could even, as part of your turn, instead of placing a land or collecting knowledge books, you can move 1 sage, 1 space.
Yep.
And that's your turn, right? If you just want to get a guy off the map.
Or maybe you're like 1 away from one of your places or something.
Right, or I see that you're probably going to take away the next land to my right. I want to get over to that card because I want to get that reward. And then you're going to keep going until you basically end the game, and then whoever has the most sun books at the end wins.
Yeah.
Last thing to talk about, though,
our allies.
Our allies, right? Because we didn't really talk about them yet, and we'll give you a nice quick zoom in on those. So, and now that we explained it, it'll make more sense what the actual skills are. So, what does your ally do?
Okay, so I've got Omnibugs to start with. So once per turn during your action phase, so again, that's that phase where we're choosing from one of 4 things. If you have sages in each of the 3 location types, you can you distribute 2 steps among your sages. So I would need to have a sage on prairies in order to take advantage of this. And if I had that condition met, I would get to maybe move this guy 1 and this guy 1, or whatever I wanted to do with those 2 steps. They're also upgradable. So we have an upgraded text on the bottom of the card, which makes them more powerful. Once per turn during your action phase, if you have sages in locations of any 2 types, one of your sages takes 1 step. And then in each of your turns, you may use either Omnibug's power or feature. So,
which is pretty cool.
Yep, very cool.
Yep, and I've got the Wind Bugler I chose. So when your sage enters a new path, you take 1 additional step. So if I were to actually get him over to this new path, he would actually start off by getting a little extra push by the Wind Bugler. If I upgrade it once per game ability, when your sage is about to return to the reserve, meaning there was no connected path,
right,
and he hits a dead end and he has to move, he actually falls off the board and comes back to my reserve. But instead, I'll place him on any other path in mountains. So I would be like, you know what? Bang, there you go.
The Wind Bugler's like,
and then he would take 3 steps. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Instead of 1 by the Wind Bugler's power. So that's him. So these were randomly dished out in the beginning. There are plenty of allies.
And you will collect more as you progress through the scenarios, too.
Absolutely. And to go over some of these tokens. Now, these aren't all the token types, but these are the token types that were for our given scenario, which is the introductory scenario that they recommend. So here you have milestones. And milestones refer to the scenario. So the scenario we're playing is called Favor of the Gods. And in the setup, it'll tell you milestone A, the first one, each player takes 2 books of prairies. It's just giving you a bonus as you go along, right? The second item is this owl, right? And you've got these great reference cards that tell you exactly what they're doing. The owl is draw a new ally, right? So we draw 3 ally cards, keep 1, and we're going to have 2. You'll have a max of 3 allies in the game. Down here, it's the same thing, but you have a choice now. You can upgrade one of your allies' abilities or take an additional ally. And then, as we said earlier, end of times signifies end of game.
Yeah.
And that, folks, is Fabled, the Spirit Lands. Now, as we said, there are plenty of scenarios in the scenario guide. So the scenario guide has a bunch of them. What this first scenario does not have are events. So there are specific event cards, event decks that you'll have different tokens out that will tell you when to draw those events, and they make certain things happen thematically throughout the game. Yeah. So really neat little twist if you want a little bit more flavor and more challenge, really. your game.
Yeah. It's an interesting kind of, I mean, it's basically like a turn chits into other chits and other chits, and then whoever has the most at the end wins. But the fact that you have to really balance converting those chits versus using them to get the lands that you need to potentially get to the fabled places that are going to be a little more rewarding, really pushes you in a short period of time to like, what's the best decision and how do I put this together in the best way?
No, totally agree. I think it's certainly a challenging game because your resources are so tight that you're spending things and you're like, oh, you know, because to get those conversions up to the sun level, you want to spend the books to get the right lands out to get the rewards, but it takes time to get those rewards back because you've got to push your sages up through these paths in order to finally collect the reward and then get them back, and then pretty soon you're like pretty well extended before you start collecting the rewards, and you're seeing these rounds are going by and you're not getting anything. And you're like, I need to spend this round just collecting 2 prairie books because I don't have any more money.
Usually end up with like a prairie engine.
You could have a prairie engine.
And then you just like kind of flip at some point and start converting things.
Prairie and conversion engine. And then on your turn, you can just do a 1 or 2 conversion actions.
That's what I'm saying.
Where it's like, so I'm just going to convert this
You
round.
stop exploring at some point and start like converting what you have.
You have to because, you know, as it gets closer to the end, bang, once it hits 10, you got to get to the epilogue, and then it's really just, all right, who's got the most sun books? That's the winner. So really neat, really tough nut to crack. From my opinion, it's definitely a really challenging game, and we've definitely not mastered this one by any means. I'm still trying to figure out the best strategy.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
But this one is retail. Coming to retail. Is released at Gen Con. I believe it's coming to a store near you soon-ish. Right around like a $45 price point, I believe. So be on the lookout for this at your game store.
Really pretty art, really clear iconography, good components, really quality built game.
It plays fast.
So that's Fabled, the Spirit Lands. We'll also want to touch on, also by Crody Games, is a game that we've covered in the past. So a little bit of backstory on Bestiary of Siglium. So Bestiary of Siglium, which those of you who have a Steam account and play video games, could recognize this because it is on Steam to play in the video game version. But this came to Kickstarter or crowdfunding earlier in the year.
I don't remember when, but it was earlier.
And it didn't fund, they took it down. They canceled the campaign. We had done a playthrough video of this game. Really unique game. We actually enjoyed it quite a bit.
We really liked it.
For 2 people who don't typically do battle games.
I wasn't sure. Like, it's a battle arena type of situation. So we were a little like, I don't know. But when you sit down and you play it, it was really, like, we actually had more fun with it than I think I expected to have.
You totally didn't think it was going to be as enjoyable as it was. You basically
I was surprised, like, when they ended up canceling.
When they canceled, because I was like, this is a pretty good game, you know. So, and it was really just, you're in like this sort of hex grid. Each of you has a castle. You control 3 beasts, like giant monsters that have their own special abilities.
I kept crushing you.
And they just come out. Their abilities have this really cool timer system, like a cooldown. So once you use an ability, it has to go on cooldown before they can use it again. Really neat mix of monsters and skills and abilities. I thought it was
really fun.
It was a really good game. So to see that they didn't just take it down and cancel it, they took it down and they decided to make it go right to retail, which I think is a great move, and I wish we would see a lot more companies.
I think it was a really responsible move.
Yes.
And it was refreshing to see that, where it was like, okay, we didn't really do what, but we believe in our product and we're going to stand behind it and we're going to make it. And here it is in retail.
Here it is in retail. So stay tuned. There's a good chance we'll be doing an unboxing for this, so you can actually get a good look at the retail quality components, so you get a good feel. But we wanted to get some content out as soon as we could. We had just got settled in, get our new studio set up. This is the first coverage and content out of our newly
of a lot.
Newly built studio. There's a lot more stuff. So that's it. Crody Games, big coverage for today. We hope you got a good feel for what Fabled the Spirit Lands has to offer you, how it plays, what goes on there, and if you enjoy either one of these and look forward to it, they're both available for pre-order now. So and I think it's coming out next month.
I think so, like fall. Whatever cue that ends up being.
Yep. So leave any questions you have in the comments section below. I'm going to try, I've never done this before, but put a link to our playthrough video.
We have to be like, and the video's right
and the link
there.
is right somewhere,
it's somewhere
above
here.
us. I don't know exactly how that works, but I'll figure that out.
I think it's called a card.
Yeah. Otherwise, you can just search Beastier Signalium on our channel,
Games,
and it'll come
right up.
Yeah, that's usually the easier way. But in any case, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you.